If you could relive this exact life, every pain, every mistake, every tear, and every joy, infinitely many times, would you say yes to it? Or would your heart plead for a silent escape? Your true freedom isn't found in fleeing from suffering, but in the radical acceptance of every moment you've lived. The great master Nietzsche challenged us with an idea that redefines spirituality itself, the concept of the eternal recurrence, a key to personal development capable of forging your most authentic soul. Stay with me and discover why the only path to your spiritual awakening is to say yes to life, in its totality. Perhaps, right now, you feel the subtle ache of searching, the existential restlessness that modern life tries to drown out with noise. You aren't broken. You are in transformation. The invitation that presence offers us isn't for a life without discomfort, but for a life where discomfort is no longer an obstacle, but the very raw material of your inner strength. What prevents us from finding the meaning of life is not the lack of a grand answer, but our insistence on rejecting the complexity of what has already been. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche offers us a brutally honest mirror, the concept of the eternal recurrence. He invites us to a trial by fire. What if this instant, with everything it contains, were to be relived for all eternity? If your answer is yes, you have achieved the highest wisdom of a free being. It is the test of your spiritual truth. The concept of eternal recurrence is the most radical turning point in Nietzsche's philosophy. It is not a simple theory about the cosmos. It is an existential hammer thrown against your life. Imagine a demon whispering in your solitude that you will have to relive, infinitely, every detail of your existence, every thought, every joy, every profound sadness. The central question is, would the weight of this idea crush you, or would you kneel in ecstasy and say, "I want this again and again"? If you hesitate, it is because your soul is living chained to a life of compromises, regrets, and imposed duties, rather than authentic choices. Nietzsche viewed this hesitation as the sign of a life lived dimly, fleeing from the inner transformation that inevitable suffering could provide. Eternal recurrence is, in fact, a filter. It forces you to confront the quality of every moment. If every choice you made had the validity of eternity, would you allow yourself to stay in empty relationships? Would you dedicate yourself to a job that drains your vital energy? It demands an immediate spiritual awakening from us. Live in such a way that you ardently desire to relive every second. The deepest personal development does not reside in accumulating pleasures, but in forging a being capable of carrying the burden and the glory of their own story. Your answer to the eternal recurrence defines your true freedom. What if the weight of your past were not a burden, but proof that your inner strength was enough to get you here? What do you need to change today so you can love your eternal tomorrow? This courage to embrace the eternity of the instant leads us to the key concept that underpins Nietzschean philosophy, Amor Fati, the love of one's own destiny. It is not passive resignation, but the deepest affirmation of life. Amor Fati is not, as many think, simple stoic resignation in the face of what cannot be changed. It is much more than that. It is the most profound and enthusiastic affirmation of life in its totality. It is spirituality elevated to its maximum power. Nietzsche doesn't ask us to merely endure suffering. He challenges us to love it, to recognize it as a vital and irreplaceable ingredient in our recipe for personal development. Think of pain not as a detour, but as the fire of the forge that shapes the metal. Without the intense heat and the strike of the hammer, the discomfort, the material would never reach its true form, its usefulness. Amor Fati is saying, yes, I love the fire that transforms me. What blocks our spiritual awakening is the fantasy that life should be easy, fair, or painless. By fighting against what already is, the past, the inevitable, we expend precious energy that should be used for inner transformation. Amor Fati frees us from this internal struggle. It demands that you honor your entire history, recognizing that every loss, every betrayal, every mistake was the only possible path to create the being you manifest in the presence of today. True freedom is not in the choice of an ideal destiny, but in the radical acceptance of the destiny that is yours. This acceptance is the alchemy of the soul. It transforms necessity into choice and the burden of "why me?" into the strength of "I am who I am because of this." What part of your history do you still refuse to love? And what is that refusal costing your freedom and your personal development today? Remember, all emotional healing begins with Amor Fati. But if accepting destiny is the first step, what is the next move? Amor Fati does not ask for passivity. It awakens the will to power in us, the strength to become active creators of our own existence. The will to power is the engine of your personal development. It is not about external domination, but an inner force that drives every living being toward overcoming, growth, and incessant expansion. It is your vital energy, the impulse to become more than you are now, to give shape to your most authentic soul. When you affirm the eternal recurrence and embrace Amor Fati, you free yourself from herd morality, the one that tells you what is right and wrong based on fear and security. In this act of radical freedom, you become your own lawmaker. You become a creator of values, a sculptor of your own existence. The will to power demands that you stop seeking external validation and start living from your own internal truth. This is the purest essence of spiritual awakening, assuming total responsibility for your journey, without looking for gurus or magic formulas. The goal is not to reach a static state of enlightenment, but to be in constant inner transformation. This incessant pursuit of self-overcoming is what gives meaning to the individual's life. The wisdom that emerges from this force is not passive, but active. It is the courage to break your own limiting beliefs, to face your own fears, and to love yourself, not despite your flaws, but because of the strength they demanded to be overcome. The Sufi poet Rumi, who spoke the language of the soul with fervor, echoes this force of affirmation. What you seek is seeking you. The will to power is not something you acquire, but something you unleash by stopping the fight against your own expansive nature. Your sole task is to remove the obstacles that prevent this force from flowing. What is the next big step of self-overcoming that your will to power is demanding of you, but which the fear of discomfort still prevents? This will to power, which emerges from total acceptance and the act of creating yourself, demands, however, an unwavering anchor, inner listening. What good is having the power to recreate yourself if you cannot hear your authentic voice? What keeps us from saying yes to the eternal recurrence is the constant noise of the conditioned mind, the ego that fears the repetition of suffering and imprisons us in cycles of anxiety and self-judgment. True freedom is not doing what one wants, it is loving what one does. And for that, we need to create a sacred space of presence and introspection. We need to enter the cave of fertile silence. The inner master, your living soul, does not shout. It whispers. The noise of the world, and our reactivity to it, prevent us from catching this subtle frequency. Listening to the soul is an act of peaceful rebellion against the tyranny of hurry and distraction. It is there that you rewrite your limiting beliefs, identifying which fears and social conditionings are preventing your will to power from manifesting. Contemplation is not a luxury for leisure moments. It is an act of radical personal development, the essential maintenance to sustain the strength that Nietzsche demands. When you silence yourself and truly listen to yourself, you realize that most of your fears are phantoms created by the mind. Your spiritual truth is not outside, in dogmas or complex rituals. It is in your center, free from the world's expectations. It is in the inner silence that you reconnect with the natural rhythm of life, which is not rushed, yet is relentless in its movement of transformation. What is the cost of not silencing the noise? What has your soul been trying to tell you that you, absorbed by external noise, still refuse to hear? Your next act of self-overcoming is waiting for you in your next moment of inner listening. The silent wisdom we discover in listening to the soul needs to be carried into everyday life. Nietzsche's concept only becomes spiritual awakening if it is lived as a daily practice, a radical affirmation of life in its fullness. Affirming life, with its beauty and its wounds, is the highest form of personal development and will to power. It is the act of courage that takes inner transformation from theory to lived experience. The practice of radical affirmation begins with the recognition that the opposite of suffering is not pleasure, but purpose. When you find a purpose, suffering becomes merely a challenge that contributes to your strength. The Eternal Recurrence and Amor Fati demand that you stop seeking the instant miracle and embrace the slow, yet authentic process of your evolution. True spiritual growth does not happen when everything is comfortable. It happens in the reconnection with your primal strength, the one that emerges when you are forced to confront your shadow. The practice of presence is not just meditating, it is living every moment with the awareness that it holds the weight of eternity. It is the continuous test. If you had to relive this exact hour of work, of rest, of challenge, would you live it with the same quality of attention? What you do with your days is what you do with your life. Radical affirmation is the total acceptance of your journey as the only way to your freedom. By affirming the present moment, you transform suffering into freedom and align your will to power with the flow of life. If your suffering had a sacred purpose, what would be the lesson you refuse to validate? And what do you need to affirm and love today so that your soul feels whole? Saying yes to the eternal recurrence is the purest form of Amor Fati and the highest proof of awakened consciousness. It is not the instant miracle that transforms us, but the courage to love the slow, yet true process. The vase is only useful because it has empty space. Emotional healing is possible, but it resides in your authenticity. Embrace this inner transformation. Become the lamp lit in the dark. If you felt touched by these words, I invite you to take the next step on this journey of self-knowledge. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to nurture this newly lit flame and continue walking with us on the same frequency. If you are looking for a safe harbor, know that our community is the sanctuary where fertile silence is shared and deepened. And to continue expanding your sanctuary of clarity, we suggest the video in the card. May it be a new source of inspiration, peace and light.